crimes demand greater punishments, that punishment should fit the crime, and that the prisoners with lesser crimes should have lesser punishment. My opponent assumes that all criminals to the death penalty is worse than life in prison, but according to Stanford psychiatry professor Donald Lund, there's at least one whom is incentive. Such murderers, says Lund, are attracted by the Jimmy Cagney image of live fast, die young, and have a beautiful corpse. Even if we make an exception to that, there's some people that we prefer life death penalty over life without parole, because simply there's better conditions in a maximum high security facility where you don't have to deal with gang members, you don't have to deal with all these people. It's just purely better conditions. To add on to my opponent, or to my allies' points, we say that human life is sacred, and to show that we are going to kill someone in the name of it. It continues a cycle of violence that is unnecessary and promotes a greater problem. The cycle of violence it promotes can easily be seen in how other countries have done after abolishing the death penalty. As neighboring countries, such as Canada, where the death penalty has been abolished since 1976, studies from Amnesty International show that the murder rate has dropped 27%. Also, according to United Nations Development Program, the death study, the United Nations Development Program study that shows that the 5 countries with the highest homicide rates that do not impose the death penalty average 21.6 murders per 100,000 people. The 5 countries with the highest homicide rate that do impose the death penalty average 41.6 for every 100,000 people. Secondly, my opponent points out that it costs $75,000 a year to keep a murderer in prison cell. Most people don't realize that carrying out one death sentence costs 2 to 5 times more than keeping that same criminal in prison for the rest of his life. It has to do with endless appeals, additional required procedures, and legal wrangling that drive the process out. It's not unusual for a prisoner to be on death row for 15 to 20 years. Judges, attorneys, clerks, and court facilities all require substantial investment by the taxpayers. He also says that it costs $2,775,000 on average, which even if it is true, is still substantially less by the lowest figure done by state government groups, which point to be an average of $3 million per case, and even more substantially less than for the high figure of $7 million per case by anti-death penalty groups. Also, on the dangerousness of people on death row, there's a hasty generalization being made here. Not every person on death row are as dangerous as the next. Some are innocent. Some, like Leroy Nash at the age of 94, pose no threat to anyone, as his lawyers described him as a doddering old man who can't hear, can't see, can't walk, and is very, very loony. But even if we neglect that those people exist, Emmanuel already contradicts himself in saying that inmates are in high security prisons. If they are in high security prisons that are specifically designed to prevent much mobility, they can't possibly be a danger to society, except for atypical cases. Criminals usually are, this is another point to substantiate my partner's claims, is basically the idea that criminals are looked down by society, and that once we impose the death penalty, we create sympathy for them. People are generally disgusted by the vile, untouchable acts they commit and feel tremendous sympathy for the victims of murder, rape, etc. However, the death penalty has a way of shifting sympathy away from the victims and to the criminals themselves. An excellent example is the 2005 execution of former gang leader Tookie Williams. This is one of the original members of the notorious Crips gang, which has a long legacy of robbery, assault, and murder. This is a man convicted with overwhelming evidence of the murder of 4 people, some of whom he shot in the back and then laughed at the sounds they made as they died. This is a man who never even took responsibility for the crimes or even apologized to the victims. Those victims have kids and spouses, but instead of sympathy for them, sympathy shifted to Tookie. Candlelight vigils were held for him. Websites like SaveCookie.org sprung up protests and a media circus ensued trying to prevent the execution, which eventually did take place 26 years after the crime itself. There are many cases like this, which make a mockery of the evil crimes that these criminals commit.